users? Russia. Why? No, because VK has beaten Facebook in Russia to this point. And instead of integrating to Facebook, we integrate with VK. Shh. Okay. Why are there disproportionately more men than women on Instagram in the Middle East? Privacy? That's roughly correct. What's that? That's actually true, but what's actually happening is there aren't, except they all sign up as men. Because they're worried about being harassed. That's pretty sad, but also something you would not know unless you talk to someone, right? So it's really important to marry your quantitative understanding with even just talking with a handful of people so you understand what's going on. That's context that you'll never get unless you talk with some people. Cool. The last law is the law of consistency. So this is the January gym law, right? Which is everyone's excited, you've got a great roadmap, you start going down the path, and then things start getting hard, and some of these experiments don't work. Like, what do you do, and how do you stay disciplined? Few things. There's a certain psychology of roadmap frequency that works well for us. It may not for you. We're obviously a slightly bigger company, but I'll share it with you because I like it. Which is every half we have a strategy for what we're trying to do. That's great. That may be a little too long if you're a smaller company. But every half we also have 3 roadmaps. And 3 roadmaps does sort of this weird and interesting thing, which is like you have one roadmap and you still have more than half of the half left. So you have plenty of time to sort of figure out what to do. You finish 2 roadmaps, and you actually still have one whole roadmap left if you aren't anywhere near your goal and all those things. And that actually contributes to the sort of this nice psychology that people don't feel nervous. They actually feel like they still got opportunity to hit whatever the goals are, and that works really well for us. The other thing about the roadmap frequency is that effectively means that every roadmap is 2 months long. Okay? And the way that we structure it is we go 2 months of trying to figure out what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks to trying to figure out what we're trying to figure out to do, and then we're going to execute for 6 weeks. So we do that over a 2-month cycle. And the key with the execution for 6 weeks is that everyone shuts up. There's always new ideas. The landscape always changes. And instead of thrashing yourself, find the right frequency for your team, and when the execution window happens, take your ideas, park them in a document, talk about it later, talk about it in the next 2 weeks. Because what you're trying to do is execute on that 6-week window with as little thrash as possible. And if you think you're being actually more nimble by constantly changing things and moving around, I think what you'll find out is that you're actually not structured in what you're trying to do over time, and that's where some of this discipline comes in. Roadmaps beget roadmaps. So I'm a big believer that analytics folks and research folks need roadmaps too. So when we all say, hey, this is what we're going to do for the next 6 weeks and execute on a roadmap, I ask them also to tell me what their roadmap is. Because on a 6-week window of time, they can actually do something meaningful. Your analytics people and your research people do not want to look at experiment results and tell you what happened all day. They do not want to go into a research room and say, do you like the button on the left side or the right side all day? They hate that. What they want to do is have a window of time to say, okay, you give me 6 weeks and some data, and I'm going to tell you whether it's more important to show you a friend to connect to when you start on Instagram or Beyonce. Or I'm going to go talk to some researchers and figure out what is the psychology behind starting your account on Instagram as public or private. And then how do we take all of that, package it up in something actionable, so when the next roadmap shows up and you're in that 2-week window, you're not starting from scratch. You've got a bunch of really great quantitative and qualitative analysis that feeds into that 2 weeks, rinse and repeat. Okay? I know everyone in this room thinks that they can just build a roadmap from scratch, and that's fine. It's awesome to not have to build a roadmap when someone else does it for you. And so I would encourage you to do that with your analytics and research folks to the extent that you have those resources. The last thing is keep calm. You know, like, growth is the most stressful freaking job ever. When everything's bad, you're bad. When everything's good, you're like, why the hell is it good? You just don't know. And so, like, I figured I'd just share with you on a completely arbitrary chart the feelings that I've had, certainly, at various moments when we've been watching these things. So, 1, damn it, what happened? January 1st was so awesome. We acquired all these users in December, and they all turned out, and we're now back to basically November numbers. You're just gripping, like, what's going on? Then you're like, what was that? And it turns out that's Valentine's Day. Great. Everyone loves taking pictures on Valentine's Day. That's phenomenal. No, that awesome growth thing was so great up until none of the acquired users I got stuck around. Why did that intern push code that logged out all the iOS users? That actually happened. Spam team didn't do their job. Came over and said, hey, so it turns out there's about a couple percentage of accounts that actually aren't real, guys. We had to correct that. Oh my God, everyone's had this moment. You don't even know what's going on, you're just crying. It turns out it's actually good, and this is the side story, which is Instagram is so young in its demographic that the reason why there's a dip this time every year is because they go back to school. So it's really interesting. We had this intraday chart of people and their usage, and you see green throughout the day. Like, teens are like, green, green, green. And then literally in September, it's like green until 9 in the morning, red. And then green, 3 p.m. till the evening. And that's that dip, every year. And then hopefully all of you, if you've done all these things right, get to experience a little bit of what we've had the fortune of experiencing at Instagram, which is like that everything works and that you know what's going on and you're doing really good experiments based off of not only a quantitative understanding of your ecosystem, but also a qualitative understanding of it, and that you get some good stuff on the other side. That's all I've got for you. Thank you. I don't know if there are questions. What's the timing? How do you know if growth is due to optimal growth strategy or due to a fabulous product? It's a good question. You cannot A/B test all of your growth stuff. So it's tricky. And so this is why I say it's stressful to be a growth person. If things are going not well, it's on you. If things are going well, what question do you get? Well, was it you? Right? And the short answer is, you can't always know these things. We always like to do holdouts so we have an understanding of it, but just to keep in mind, it's easy to throw the word holdout out, but like, it means you're leaving a percentage of people in your community behind on some shittier version of the product, and so you should do that with like incredible like consciousness. But here's an example, which is, we have an algorithm that shows you who you should follow in the system. So whether it's Beyonce or Snoop Dogg or your friend or your mom, and that's constantly trying to figure out what the right thing to show is. But there's certainly like any number of algorithms that you can show to people that may have a short-term effect or may have a long-term effect. We actually do have a holdout on that. And so we have a very clear understanding that when we make changes to that and we hold people back on an older algorithm, it's important in this particular area. Most people don't know they're being held back in an older algorithm, so it doesn't have a UI effect on people, and then see the difference in terms of like growth over time. I will tell you that the algorithm that suggests to you who you should follow is responsible for at least 2 to 3% of growth from Instagram on the MAU side over the last couple of years. So it's pretty significant. I would not encourage you to try and do this for every single possible thing. You just need to have conviction over some products that are good. We moved to phone registration over email registration and did not look back. And while the initial numbers didn't look perfect, it was absolutely the right thing to do because this world is about phone numbers and not emails anymore. So do it where you can, but at the same point in time, like this one's actually fairly difficult. What are some of the favorite or memorable growth campaigns that you saw at IG? the two campaigns, so like prior to me being at IG, we never sent any emails. In fact, none of the emails were even confirmed because IG didn't require email confirmation before you actually joined. So it was memorable in the sense that we sent about 600 million emails and got like 300 million bounces. That was pretty crazy because we didn't know what was confirmed and what wasn't. The thing that was probably most stressful was probably the brand change. Right, like, I mean, that's something that you certainly cannot A/B test the magnitude of the, whether or not people like it or not. That's purely qualitative. Again, we were in this mode of fixing forward, but like, sharing with the entire world that we had changed our logo, especially given the fact that, logo changes can be positive or negative, was sort of an interesting thing. But we did sort of face that sort of head on and sent a bunch of emails, and that was actually ended up being a really valuable growth mechanism for us in that window of time. How does it work with 3 roadmaps at once? Do they overlap in time, or do they go sequentially? They go sequentially. So what it means is, effectively, and you've got a little bit of buffer here because there aren't, like 8-week segments that actually add up to the entire year, but it means you spend the first 2 weeks having the team figure out what they want to do. What analytics, what research have you already collected? What brainstorms do you want to have? All that stuff. You get it in a roadmap. I do not encourage like high fidelity, presentations. Just like write down what you're going to do for a 6-week window. You go into the 6-week window. You execute the hell out of what you said you were going to do. Once you're out, the next 2 weeks are sort of rinse and repeat. But it also gives engineering a time to sort of like, refactor code, fix some bugs, and all that stuff, and it's kind of a nice breather for that team as well. But totally sequential in sort of how you do it. So one after another after another. What were the main drivers of international growth for Instagram? What moved the needle internationally? There's a bunch of things here which are pretty specific to specific countries, I would say. So example, like Russia, integration with VK and OK, which is actually the secondary network there, were really big. And that actually is one of the things that skyrocketed us past Facebook. Another one, as an example, is just like internationalization and language. One of the bigger ones that actually wasn't like we all of a sudden saw giant growth was just working really hard to get local accounts that people wanted to follow. So like the India example I gave before, it turns out that everyone wants to follow cricket and Bollywood, and we actually needed to go out there and make sure that the cricket and Bollywoods were on Instagram. And that actually makes a huge difference for people because of the local feeling around like what they want to do. The superstars that are global are great. Like we will have that superpower, and that's awesome. But it turns out it's the mix of friends and local and sort of the global stuff that actually makes Instagram work for most people. Was there a time? One more? Okay, one more. How is the growth team structured? What roles do startups need for a growth team? It's a good question. I think the key people that are probably part of the growth team: product team, analytics team, research team, design, engineering. That's probably your baseline. As far as structure goes, it's exactly what I showed you in that chart with people. It's who's going to work on the vast majority of people who have not used Instagram yet, and where are you going to go in terms of figuring out which one of those buckets to go after. Of all the people who are joining, how are you going to make sure that they stick around after registration? Of all the people who are literally like languishing on Instagram today, visiting once a month, what are you going to do to get them so that they're more active on the platform? And for all the people who have left us, what are you going to do to get them back instead of showing them the same thing that they left? Like, how do you engage them again on opportunities to get them not only back to the ecosystem, but hopefully into this engaged state? I'm very audience-centric on this one. I want people to make sure that they understand the community and what they want versus just acquisition or retention. I mean, they map fairly cleanly, but there's something different about being empathetic to that group. I think that's my last question. Thank you very much. I will be around, so happy to answer questions after.